Hey, folks, just want to let you know that after we recorded this episode of Tape to Tape, John Hines was fired by the New Jersey Devils. We did not have that info while we were discussing possible Taylor Hall destinations for a trade, but we were talking about teams getting desperate, and clearly that's what happened. Things went sideways enough in New Jersey for GM Ray Shapiro to make that move. We suspect there may be another move coming somewhere down the line involving Mr. Hall. But just bear in mind, when we're having that Devils conversation, we did not know that John Hines would not be the man to lead this team forward. Hey, welcome to Tape, powered by the new Ram 1500 Sport, built exclusively for Canadians. I'm Ryan Dixon. I'm a writer for Sportsnet.ca. Joining me in the booth today, another writer for Sportsnet.ca, it is Luke Fox. Luke, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Thanks for jumping in. Rory is away again this week. We'll have to hear what his excuse is when he gets back. I just think he's dogging it, but we'll see what he has to say for himself. But he'll be back in the booth soon enough, and I know we'll be talking about, if it hasn't happened by then, the Taylor Hall trade. So I want to talk about that with you, Luke. We're going to talk about Leafs. You're heading out on the road with the team here shortly. And we're going to bring Sean Shapiro in to talk about maybe the most interesting team. I mean, it's tough for us. We get lost here in Leafland, and the Mike Babcock firing and Sheldon Keefe getting promoted felt like the biggest news in the world. But the Dallas Stars have lived like 7 seasons in one already. They got off to just a brutal start, but have really turned things around and look like a power again in the Central. So we are going to ask Mr. Shapiro of The Athletic what's been going on with that team. But let's start with what is increasingly feeling like the biggest storyline on ice anyways in the NHL. The New Jersey Devils get pumped by Buffalo 7-1 on Monday night. We're recording this on Tuesday afternoon. And in a season where there's already been rumblings coming from Taylor Hall about not liking the fans booing the team when they're only down a couple goals, a guy who we all know is in the last year of his contract. We all know is on the front lines of NHL trade chatter. And we know at this point the New Jersey Devils are listening and listening hard. What's your gut feeling up to the minute on where and when we might see number 9 maybe wearing a different number with a different team?
Well, originally I thought this might be a trade deadline deal, but things are going so far south, so fast for New Jersey. And Hall, even his recent comments, he just seems, fed up.
Yeah.
And just kind of over it. And he wants to win so badly. I mean, he's had one playoff series in his whole career. And I talked to him in the summer, and he feels like it's kind of shrinking away from him. And it's starting to set in. I'm not a young guy anymore. He wants to win. He wants to thrive off that playoff competition. So originally I was thinking this might be a trade deadline deal, but you have to wonder if there might be more suitors for him now. I mean, here's the game for Shapiro.
Most teams believe they're in the playoffs right now, right?
Exactly. More teams believe it. So Shapiro has the win is almost as important as the where for Shapiro. He has to play this right. Is he going to get the max value for Hall now as opposed to later? And what if he's so disinterested and they fall so far out that he's not producing? I mean, he's not already lighting the world on fire now, but what if he starts to slide a bit? Maybe his highest value could be today, depending on what happens. We don't know. So it'll be really interesting. Plus, I think you got a couple GMs that might already feeling the pressure, and the first guy that pops to my mind is Mark Bergevin. So I think that would be an interesting fit. And then the complicated thing for Hall, I think, is in order for Shapiro to get max value in return, you have to do like what Ottawa did with Vegas and Mark Stone last year. And it's, if you trade a guy to a team that he's willing to re-sign with, you usually get more bang for your buck. But that's going to be tricky because Hall, looks like the kind of guy that, hey, I've come this far. Why don't I peek behind that curtain and see what free agency is all about?
It's really hard to imagine him not doing it now that he is this far down the road. Yeah. You're right. Like, I just can't, Mark Stone wasn't making all kinds of noise about admiring the guys before him who went to free agency the way he has with Tavares, Taylor Hall has. Like, I just get the sense that he's 6 months away now. He's going to see this thing through.
I'd be shocked if he didn't.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why is because I talked to Matt Duchene before his UFA year, And he talked a lot about John Tavares and how that opened his eyes and how, players are taking more control of their own situations. And he studied that and was kind of admiring how Tavares handled it. And Hall did the same thing.
Yeah.
He talked about Tavares in a very positive light, and that would be kind of interesting to be in that situation. So, I mean, he has that power now. Just ride it out. So maybe, unless it's, with a team in a situation that he absolutely falls in love with, and then maybe you build that in as a condition of the trade that, hey, you get an extra second or extra first if he re-signs. I see him going the distance.
That's a risky move for a team like Montreal to make right now when you've got a guy who's unlikely to commit and you've dug yourself a wonderful little hole here with an 8-game losing streak. Like,
that's when you see it, right? That's when you see a risky move, is when a team is kind of in panic mode.
We got to do something.
Yeah, and you got to think they're feeling that in Montreal. Like, how many more years can Bergevin go and not, dress a playoff team?
It's crazy how quickly things can change in this quick NHL game these days. And I've said this on the pod before. You can tell me if you think I'm crazy, but I actually think there's some parallels. I mean, there was obviously parallels between New Jersey and the Islanders, what the Islanders went through with Tavares, only in that, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I thought the Islanders would be okay on the ice without Tavares. I thought they would crater too, like everyone else, and it's crazy the degree to which they've gone the other way. But I do remember thinking when Tavares left the Islanders on what was obviously a devastating day for the franchise was actually still in better shape than it had been throughout the entire time Tavares was there, because they'd finally secured a new arena deal. They finally had good ownership in place. They had Matt Barzal. Yes, it sucked that they lost John Tavares, but big picture, there were pillars there that I felt long-term would keep them, would have them going the right way. Now, it turns out they just had to get Barry Trotz to run the team, and boom, they're fantastic. And I look at New Jersey and I think, well, you traded Adam Larson for Taylor Hall 4 years ago. Hall came, drove you to a playoff spot that was probably premature, got excitement in your building, won an MVP, and now he's probably going to leave, and you're going to get something back for him. As much as you would have loved for it to be this scenario where Taylor Hall came and that was the day everything changed and, winning came back to New Jersey, this was always a team that was very much more in a rebuild, retool. And even when he leaves, they're going to get whatever they get back for him. They're going to have Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier down the middle. I mean, Mackenzie Blackwood is kind of sort of finding his way in the net, and they have a good GM at the helm. I'm just saying all is not lost. And, signing Taylor Hall to a mega deal, I understand the incentive to do that, but he's a guy who's known to miss a lot of games. He's had some injury problems. He is, relatively, and as a guy who's got the big 4-0 coming up very soon here, he's obviously young at 28, but in, pro hockey terms, you'd rather be paying for 20 to 28 than 28 to 34, right? So I don't know that it's a slam dunk that if you're a team like New Jersey, it absolutely makes sense to sign him to a $10 million per year deal, even if he would have you. I mean, clearly, if there was a deal to be made there, they would be happy to make it. But I don't think New Jersey is left with a smoking crater and, where do we go from here?
Yeah, and I think the key is knowing when it's your time. And I think Shapiro, it seems, is smart enough to realize that they're not one Taylor Hall away.
No.
So why not sell and keep reloading and build around Jack Hughes and make that your centerpiece as opposed to Taylor Hall. I mean, it was really interesting in the offseason, the fact that they went out and got Subban. It didn't have to pay
They didn't have to pay much to do that. That's right.
And they took their shot, see if they could add a couple bodies. Wayne Simmons, there was some interesting additions.
Made sense.
And it didn't pan out, right? Or it hasn't panned out yet. They're in too far of a hole. So why not just say, hey, you know what? Let's go with the youth. I know it's going to require more patience, but they should get another high draft pick of their own. They have guys they can sell off. Like The Wayne Simmons one's kind of interesting because he's picked up his game a little bit. He's been a bit healthier than his last couple years in Philly, and the fact that they got him at a pretty reasonable rate, I think it was $5 million and only 1 year, they could flip him pretty quickly. Like a lot of playoff teams might take a look at him. So there's pieces they can sell off.
Absolutely. I mean, look at a team like Colorado and where we thought the Avs were before they traded Matt Duchene. Like, do you remember when Colorado used to be this forlorn franchise that we all thought was being run into the ground? And boom, they win that trade, and Nathan McKinnon goes to another level. And, Rantanen all of a sudden shows what he is. And now we're talking about them like this team that's set up for the next 10 years. Maybe it's not exactly the same in New Jersey, but Jack Hughes is probably tracking the Nathan McKinnon. I mean, they expect him to be a guy who's going to be in the Hart Trophy conversation. Nico Hischier is going to be a dynamite. I mean, to be able to slot that guy in as your number 2 moving forward, I just still think there's reasons to feel okay in New Jersey. All right. We've had you in here in the aftermath of Sheldon Keefe taking over for Babcock. It was in the immediate aftermath. What have you seen from the team since they became the Sheldon Keefes or the Toronto Keefes? And what do you think lies ahead here as we learn a little more about the team, maybe playing some stiff competition?
Yeah, there's been a lot of tinkering. Like he wasted zero time putting his stamp on this team. For one, we just saw Nick Shore get waived, and Jason Spezza has been integrated more than he was under Babcock. With Marner coming back from injury, there was going to be players that had to go just for salary cap reasons. And under Babcock, the sense was Nick Shore was staying, and Spezza, was probably on the outs and, maybe out of the NHL for good. So there's been small things like that. Philosophically, it's been mentioned many times, but they're playing more of a possession type game, bring it back out if they don't have a great look, moving up the ice as a 5-man unit, as opposed to, having a winger stand at center ice, deflect the puck in, and then go and chase it and really rely on forechecking, which, outside of Zach Hyman isn't exactly the Leafs' strong suit. So if the look isn't there, they bring it back, they pass it around a little bit more, and wait till they have a good opportunity. Now, Auston Matthews was saying that they need to find a happy medium here because they can't always possess it. Sometimes you do have to chip it in, or you do have to shoot and not make that extra pass. So the team's kind of still struggling with finding out how they want to play, using what they did right before and bringing in and kind of melding that with what Keefe wants to see. And so it's still a work in progress, even though they jumped out to like a 4-1 record under him. Some of that was against softer competition, and a lot of that was Freddie Anderson covering up mistakes, which was kind of, it's been that way for the last 3 years. I think the biggest thing is, and guys have said this, is it's mental.
Yeah.
I think it was just a refresh. So the trick is, how much of this is a honeymoon period and how much of it is, okay, they actually have confidence, they're actually playing better. And I think on this road trip, we're going to see it because they're playing St. Louis, which is a top-tier team. Edmonton's near the top of their division. So Vancouver's a bit of a stronger opponent. So it'll be pretty interesting to see what they're like against tougher opponents.
So you are heading out with the Leafs on that week-long roadie. What's it like, number one, traveling with this team? But actually, before we get to that, what's the atmosphere in the building when they go through Western Canada? I mean, most of us, we see on TV. I've never been to a Leaf game out there, I don't think. But what's the vibe in those buildings when the Leafs come to town?
It's awesome. It's really cool. And everyone, the locals, whatever city you're in, they all remark on it. There's more people in the building for warm-up, even more than they get here at Scotiabank, because there's so many Leaf fans out there, or they travel, because it's a bit cheaper because you're paying Canadian dollars, not US dollars. So people will build trips around it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like every goal is celebrated no matter which team scores, because the buildings are nearly half full of Leaf fans, and they're the diehard Leaf fans who are, paying cheaper prices than they would here in Toronto. So they're often, on a road trip or whatever. So they're very vocal. So it's like every goal gets celebrated. It's awesome.
And what's it like as a reporter, just kind of being part of the traveling roadshow? I mean, can you feel the buzz even at morning skates just because there's, more media there than there would normally be? Like, is there kind of a buzz that follows around all aspects of the team?
Yeah, there definitely is. And there's some really cool matchups now because there's superstars in all these cities, like on a personal, it's my first time getting to see Elias Pettersson play because he was injured when the Canucks rolled through Toronto last season. So I haven't seen him play live. So I'm really excited about that. Calgary has some superstars and no shortage of storylines this season. And of course, you get McDavid versus Matthews and Draisaitl versus Marner. Like there's a lot of star power for that Saturday night game in a couple weeks. It's going to be electric.
I sometimes think we don't zoom out enough in Canada and think about. I mean, when we talk about Canada and the NHL, almost always the first thing that comes up is, no Canadian team has won the Cup since 1993, and I recognize that. No team has been particularly close of late, but, you start rhyming off. Pettersson in Vancouver, obviously McDavid, Draisaitl in Edmonton, and Calgary. We could record 2 hours on what that team has been through, but even just looking, keeping it on ice, there's quite a team there. I mean, Ottawa, there, of course, are questions at the ownership level, but man, they're amassing quite a prospect pool. Winnipeg, if their defense hadn't been depleted, we'd be talking about for sure as a cup contender. There really is a lot of intriguing pieces in Canada right now and high enders. I mean, like you said, Pettersson against Matthews, the McDavid matchup, like these are there's heavyweight franchise players populating these Canadian teams right now.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned Quinn Hughes.
Yeah,
like what a superstar that kid is or is going to be. That's the other thing. It's like these teams play pretty fun styles of hockey. They're not winning by defense or by grinding you down. All these teams have some high octane offenses that on any given night could put in 6 goals. So I think that adds to it, right? The entertainment factor.
Absolutely. Well, make sure you are checking out Luke for entertaining writing while he is following the Leafs through their Western road swing. That will kick off next week on the 12th. They are in Vancouver, and this Saturday coming up, they start it in St. Louis. All right, on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about some high-paid goalies who are having a bit of a rough go in the crease right now. Lots of dollars being paid to masked men who aren't quite stopping the puck the way some teams had hoped for. After that, Sean Shapiro of The Athletic joins the show, so make sure you stick around right here on Tape to Tape. Welcome back to Tape to Tape. My guess is if you're listening to a hockey podcast, you are probably into fantasy hockey, and if that is the case, you better be checking out the Sportsnet Fantasy Pool presented by RAM. Just go to sportsnet.ca/RAM. There are cash prizes. You can win a 2020 RAM 1500 Sport. How sweet would that be? Once again, just go to sportsnet.ca/RAM to sign up. Luke, how is your fantasy team performing this year?
Well, I have Sidney Crosby on my fantasy team, so I just went from top 3 to bottom 2.
You're in rebuild mode.
I'm in rebuild mode because you look on the waiver wire and there aren't any
no
Sidney
Crosby there
to pick up. Yeah,
no.
And I'm in a league with no IR, so
really?
I can't. So I was forced with the decision to either drop him and risk someone picking him up, or just hold them,
write it
and you're not getting any points from that position.
It's a keeper pool of some kind, or is it just year by year?
This one's year by year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that is tough. I'll tell you who is contemplating dropping some goalies right now. Owners of Carey Price, Sergei Bobrovsky, he of the big $10 million contract in the offseason. Those two probably the highest profile and highest paid guys among a group of goalies you wrote about in your Quick Shifts weekly column that really aren't given much return on their buck right now.
No, it's kind of ridiculous. Yeah, Price and Bobrovsky are 1-2 in terms of average, or not average, in terms of the salary they're raking in this season, and both of them have a sub 900 save percentage. And I was going through the top paid goalies, and there's 12 goalies that make at least $6 million, and half of them are below 900.
That's crazy.
It's just like a cautionary tale, I think, for GMs to overpay for goalies. And then I looked at, the goalies with the best save percentage, and the vast majority of them were getting paid, $4 million or less. And it's just kind of reinforces what a fickle position it is. And then you go but at the same time, you have to pay for goaltending because you can't have bad goaltending.
You got to have
There's
it.
examples of that all over the place.
You still got to have it.
But there's such risk in overpaying. Pekka Rinne's having an off year. Martin Jones hasn't bounced back really.
As the Sharks have. It's not like he's been lighting the world on fire.
It's not him. So there's enough out there that are kind of, should send a warning to GMs to be careful before you commit too deep to goalies.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it, and it's going to come up in this summer because you got Braden Holtby and a few other guys that are going to be looking for, using Bobrovsky as a comparable.
And it's so tempting as a GM because, yes, as much as you can know, I don't want to put too much of my cap into this, when it feels like there's an opportunity to go out and just lock down the most important position, what is still the position where if you're not getting play there, it's killing you. It's just so tempting, right? Mm-hmm. But, I mean, you look at someone like Price, who I think is now in year 2 of that $10 million extension, and who knows how it plays out over the course of the whole contract. I mean, I can tell you if I was Marc Bergevin, I would have absolutely offered him those dollars given how important he's been to that team. But even someone like Price goes through months like he did this November and last year in November where he just, he's fighting it. Now, I will say in his case, his teammates aren't doing a lot to help him, and sometimes that's the case as well. But for $10 million, you're supposed to paper over those mistakes, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting though. It's like a conundrum because what if he said, you know what, Carey, we're not paying you that much?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Then he's going to get destroyed.
That's right.
He's a folk hero in that town, right? And
I could go on about this forever, but that's always my point when it comes to really but a lot of free agents who are, I mean, like we talked about with Taylor Hall, in and around that 28, 29, 30. They've already done so much, and people cry when you give them a long-term extension and say, well, at 5 years from now, they're not going to be worth it. Well, maybe that's the case, but are you prepared to just go, either you sign for the most team-friendly number out there, or we're just going to lose you. Bye-bye. You're gone for nothing. Like Carey Price walking out the door for nothing, or even saying a year out that you're going to trade this guy who's been the team MVP for 5-6 years. That's just a really, 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 really tough call.
And what are the chances Bergevin's the GM by the time that contract expires? He's like, I want to win now.
Yeah.
This is the best goalie that I can get, so this is why I'm doing it, and then it'll be someone else's problem. Yeah. But I don't think he envisioned year 2 of the deal. Things starting to go south.
No, we'll see. I mean, if they can tighten up a little for Price, my suspicion is he'll be fine. But yeah, it doesn't look great right now. All right. It didn't look great for the Dallas Stars coming out of the gate. That is for sure. They really stumbled, but man, they turned things around quick. We're going to bring on Sean Shapiro to talk about what has gone on in Dallas. Stick around on Tape to Tape. Time now for our overtime segment, brought to you by Subway. No joke, Subway now delivers. Joining us for overtime this week, he covers the Dallas Stars for The Athletic. It is Sean Shapiro. Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, guys. How about you?
We're all right. We want to know how this team, who I believe, Luke, was this your Cup pick or Western Conference pick?
It was my Cup pick.
Pick.
Yeah.
That came out of the gate 1-7-1. 2/3 of the way through October, we were ready to throw dirt on this team. And suffice it to say, it's been quite a turnaround in the past month. I'm sure it could be a very long answer and lots of things are at play, but if you were to boil it down, what has helped the Stars turn things around so quickly and to such a large degree?
Well, I mean, to boil it down to the simplest thing was they started playing offense. Really, they didn't play off. I mean, the first 9 games or so, when they were 1-7-1, they struggled offensively. They didn't get much done. And then during that 12-game point streak, they started scoring goals again. They started scoring goals. They started getting depth scoring. They started getting the kind of play more of the play they expect from some of the bigger guys, some of the big guns. And I mean, that's, if you want to boil it down as simple as you can, that's really what it is. This team they were good defensively. They bought into that identity. That's what helped them last year. And there needed to be more of a realization in the first 9 games of, hey, we also have to score goals to win hockey games. And once that kind of, I know that's oversimplifying it, but once that came into play, that's what turned the season around. That things started clicking. They started becoming a threat offensively. They started scoring more goals, and it kind of led to production throughout the lineup. And that's what happened. It was, and even goes up to the coaching staff too. I remember Jim Montgomery, I think it was after the 10th or 11th game of the season, said he himself was getting too worried about their identity and needed to let the team kind of go out and play a little bit more. So with that change and with kind of more of that attack philosophy, they were able to use the weapons they have. And that's really the simple way to kind of boil it down.
So I mentioned this was Luke's Cup pick before the season, and I don't think he was completely alone. What were the internal expectations, though, for this club? I mean, they obviously took the team that ultimately won the Cup about as far as you can to overtime of Game 7. Is it fair to say that this is a team that is absolutely focused on nothing less than a championship right now?
Yeah, and that's something where this team, they looked at last season as they were either a Jamie Benn wraparound or an Andrew Cogliano rush shot or whatever one of the 2 chances you want to pick in overtime. They were that away from potentially doing what St. Louis did and winning the Stanley Cup. And they believed that's where they were, and that's why they went and made the type of moves they did in the summer, where going in for a Joe Pavelski at his age, going after getting now Corey Perry is kind of a low risk, potentially high reward signing. We'll see how it ends. But those are the type of moves that this is what a contender does. This is what someone who's trying to go and win this year does. And that was the expectation, and that's still the expectation that Dallas has right now. And obviously the play in the month of November kind of saved that aspiration internally when there was some chaotic thoughts obviously going on before that.
Sean, you mentioned Jamie Benn, and I'm really curious about the captain. I find him to be an interesting case the last couple years. Where are you at with Jamie Benn and his performance, and why do you think, his play seems to pick up when he gets called out publicly?
It's interesting because I think Jamie Benn to me is a player who, he's not the Jamie Benn that got the contract that he got. Like, I think he was signed to this big contract, and I think that set a bit of an unrealistic expectation for him to kind of keep living up to that contract numbers wise. But I think Jamie Benn is actually a pretty good. He's a rather solid top 6 player. He's a guy who, if he wasn't making $9.5 million and he was making $6 or $7 million, I don't think people would be upset with his play. I think the issue for Jamie is I think he's an older 30 than like he's 30 years old, but I think with how he played and his style, I think he aged quicker than someone who would have played a less physical style, and the Stars kind of misjudged the aging curve. And full credit to Jamie for signing the contract. And I think Jamie Benn is at a point in his career where he can't be that dominant player 82 nights a year. I just don't think it's possible. I think it's something that I don't think anyone would ever even think about doing in the NHL because it would be frowned upon, and it's a very NBA thing. But if you were to ever look at an example of where someone should use load management, it would be Jamie Benn.
Do you think it's a guarantee that he finishes out that contract in Dallas?
I think so. It's one of those where you start to. There's a couple, like I have that slight hesitancy in my voice just because there's always you play the what if game of the expansion draft, but I don't. But even in that case, Jamie holds full control and has the full no move clause. But Jamie, I'm pretty sure he finishes his career in Dallas because he's got the full control here. He has the no movement clause. He bought a house in Dallas 4 years ago. His brother Jordy Ben still lives here in the summer, and like they made Dallas home. And Jamie has pretty much said to me before that he plans to play the rest of his career here. So unless there was a massive change of heart or where he felt completely forced out, which even in the end he'd have to sign off on himself because of that full no move for the rest of the contract, I just don't see him leaving Dallas. And with what his contract is, I don't see there being realistic someone who'd be willing to take that contract either. So I think he's here. I think he is what he is, and I think it's kind of one of those things where for the Stars to have long-term success with him, they need to realize what he is. He needs to realize what he is, and that's something they'll have to balance.